Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at some sample questions and answers for part 3 of the IELTS speaking test. Recently I've been helping some people prepare for the IELTS speaking test, and they've been finding giving answers in part 3 of the test particularly difficult. They've been struggling to focus their answers on the question and have been struggling to give nice, clear and coherent answers. So I thought I'd make a quick video on some part 3 questions and give some sample answers that are really showing you kind of a really good, appropriate answer that a high-level student would give. Now, the topic we're going to look at in these questions is the topic of arriving late. So, of course, we'll have some useful vocabulary in our answers connected to the topic of lateness and time, which should be helpful for you to build up your own vocabulary with things that are kind of connected to the IELTS speaking test. Also, you'll see the appropriate kind of answers that we're giving in this part of the test that are nice and clear and concise, and they're relevant to the question that the examiner is asking. A lot of the time I find people have problems giving nice relevant answers, and this is important, that your answer connects with the question. You've got to listen to that question really carefully and understand it before you give the answer. A lot of people are very worried about giving really quick answers, showing that they understand the question. But often if you're going to try and be really quick with your answers here, well, you might misunderstand the question or not fully understand the question and give some quite unclear answers. Well, if you have an unclear understanding of the question, then it's not very likely that you're going to give a clear answer. You'll probably give a very unclear answer. So don't forget to really understand the question before you give the answer. And don't be afraid of asking the examiner to repeat the question so you can hear it again, or even check your understanding of the question by asking a yes or no question. So that's the first thing. It's important to understand the question. So what we'll do is we'll look at the 3 questions I've chosen for this video on the topic of arriving late. And then we'll look at sample answers for those 3 questions. And finally, I'll give a quick analysis of those answers, kind of just point out the really good things we're doing in those answers. But hopefully it should be pretty clear to see what the kind of appropriate part 3 answers look like. And that is answers that are, well, clear, relevant to the question, not too short, of course, because you've got to show that you can explain things fully, but also not too long, because if they're too long, they're in danger of going off topic and not being that relevant. And you might just repeat yourself a bit as well. So let's have a look at the 3 questions first. You can see here the first one is asking, do you think it's okay to arrive late when meeting a friend? So it seems like a pretty simple question to understand, and of course it's asking for your opinion. It's got the word think in there, so of course you know it's about what you think. It's a do you question, so of course we can be quite direct with the answer with a yes or no maybe at the beginning. And of course the topic, right? To arrive late when meeting a friend. So of course you've got to focus your answer on that topic, explaining, well, whether you think it's okay or not and why. So that's the first one, seemingly quite simple there. The second one is, what should happen to people who arrive late for work? So a slightly different kind of question, not a do you think question. Well, the last question, do you think, which is a very common style of question, but what should happen to people who arrive late for work? Yes, slightly different, but again, asking for your opinion. Often you'll see the word should in IELTS questions, but here, what should happen? And then the topic, to people who arrive late for work. So, of course, we're going to explain in the answer, well, what do you think should happen to those people? And maybe explain why a bit as well, of course, because we've got to give a nice full answer explaining our opinion. But again, some quite short questions here in part 3. Some people struggle with the longer questions that are hard to focus on. But here we've got kind of shorter questions that are pretty easy to follow and understand. Now, the third question is this one, a slightly longer. Can you suggest how people can make sure they don't arrive late? So here, again, a slightly different style of question, but asking for your opinion again, but kind of asking for your advice. Can you suggest how people, well, can do something? Of course, this is quite a common style of question in part 3 of the IELTS speaking test. But of course, we've got the topic. People can make sure they don't arrive late. So of course, we've got to give some suggestions here. How can people do this? And explain why you're giving those suggestions a bit as well. So those are the 3 questions there, all focused on the topic of, well, arriving late or being late for something. So of course, in our answers, we're going to focus our answers on that topic, but also we're focusing our answer on answering these styles of questions. So if they're asking for our opinion, we're giving our opinion and giving it clearly. So what we'll do now is go through these questions and look at the answers. I'm just going to read the answers out to you, listen carefully, try to kind of notice some of the good things we're doing, and there might be some things that are a bit confusing or you don't understand, and well, after I've given the answers, I'll go through them and just explain a bit about, well, some of the tricky vocabulary that I think might be difficult to understand, and also some of the good features of these answers that, well, you should be aiming to reproduce when you give your answers in part 3. Right, let's look at the first question. Do you think that it's okay to arrive late when meeting a friend? No, not really. I don't like it when my friends turn up late to see me, so I wouldn't want to be late for them. I think it's a bit inconsiderate if you're not on time, even if it is just to meet up with a friend. Having said that, there might be some cases where there's a valid excuse for getting somewhere late, but it'd have to be a pretty good reason. What should happen to people who arrive late for work? I think if it's a one-off, then the person in charge could just let it slide. However, if someone is persistently arriving to work late, they should be given a warning. And if the behaviour carries on, they should be fired. Personally, I don't think the boss should put up with lateness. Can you suggest how people can make sure they don't arrive late? I guess they've got to aim to get somewhere a bit early. I'm never really late, and it's because I give myself a bit of leeway just in case something unexpected happens. By doing this, people might turn up slightly ahead of time, but there's not much chance of them being late. Okay, there we go. Those are the 3 answers there. Hopefully you noticed they're pretty clear and relevant to the question. They're directly answering that question and just explaining a bit. You might have been slightly impressed by some of the vocabulary we're using that's related to the topic of arriving late, and I'll go through and explain that a bit. Also, of course, well, the pronunciation should have been clear. There were some good features of, well, English pronunciation. Nothing for me to be particularly proud of. I'm a native speaker of English. It comes naturally to me. But of course, it's things that you can listen to and try to imitate yourself in your pronunciation as well. Of course, grammatically, there weren't any errors in the answer. So that would be impressive to the examiner. And of course, there was a good level of fluency. The answers, of course, were not too long and also not too short, so appropriate to the questions that were given. And what we'll do is analyze it in a bit of detail now, and I'll point out some of the good things. So if we look at the answer to that first question, do you think it's okay to arrive late when meeting a friend? Now, of course, we started with a really direct answer here with a very, very short sentence there. No, not really. And I think sometimes it's okay to do this. Not every time, right? Sometimes you want to use a nice big full sentence to give you a direct answer. But here we've gone with a very short one. And of course, then we've actually kind of gone on and given a kind of an example to explain, well, why we think it's not okay. And you can see here, well, I don't like it when my friends turn up late to see me. We paraphrased a little bit here from the question, of course. There's no point really in kind of focusing on paraphrasing when you're giving your answer, but it is something that kind of people who have a high level of English will naturally just do. So it is worth practicing. But you can see here, to turn up late. Well, turn up, a phrasal verb meaning to arrive. And then the second part of that sentence, so I wouldn't want to be late for them. So of course we're giving that personal example there that's kind of explaining why we think it's not okay. Well, yeah, my feelings and the other person's feelings. Then we've explained further in this next sentence, I think it's a bit inconsiderate. Well, inconsiderate, an adjective to describe someone, or someone who is not thinking of another person's feelings, to be inconsiderate. If you're not on time, well, again, another way of paraphrasing being late is to say to be, well, not on time. Even if it's just to meet up with a friend. Again, well, we're using those phrases from the questions a bit there, but of course we've changed meeting a friend to meet up with a friend. Now, to meet up, it's just a phrasal verb that we're using there that is common in spoken English to mean, well, to kind of meet someone socially. And of course we know that's with a friend. We've actually contrasted that then, because we've said it's not okay, but maybe in particular circumstances it could be acceptable. So we've contrasted that, and you can see that in the beginning of the next sentence where we've said, having said that. Now, of course, that's contrasting, and we're kind of linking those two sentences there, which is a good thing to do. There might be some cases where there's a valid excuse. Well, this means a good reason for getting somewhere late. But it'd have to be a pretty good reason. So there we go. So we've explained our opinion fully there, that most of the time it's not okay. That's why we said no, not really at the beginning. Then we've given a nice full answer, kind of showing and explaining our opinion nice and clearly. It includes a specific example and some good explanations. Now, if we move on to the answer to the second question, which was what should happen to people who arrive late for work? Now, we've given a pretty clear answer here, nothing too long. We started with this first sentence where we're clear we're giving an opinion. We're beginning with the phrase I think. I think if it's a one-off, this might have been a confusing bit of vocabulary for some people, but a one-off is, well, when something happens just once. It doesn't often happen. Well, it is a one-off. You can see there we're using it as a noun. Countable noun here, because of course it's got the article beforehand. So yep, a nice kind of use of kind of, this would be seen as more advanced, I guess, or more idiomatic vocabulary that's used by native speakers. Then the person in charge, well, the boss, could just let it slide. Nice phrase again here, an idiomatic phrase, to let something slide. Well, kind of to accept something and not punish someone for doing something. It's a nice, again, idiomatic phrase to use here. Now, and we've explained in some circumstances, okay, if someone arrives late for work, it's okay. But we're going to contrast that, and that's why we begin the next sentence with however. However, if someone is persistently arriving to work late, persistently just means, well, the behavior persists. It continues. It keeps going, right? It's not just a one-off. They should be given a warning. And of course the question is asking what should happen to people. So of course, well, be given a warning. Here we're using a passive voice. And you'll notice in the next part of this sentence, and if the behavior carries on, meaning continues or persists, they should be fired. Again, the use of passive voice there. And we've given our opinion. Okay, well, if the behavior continues, then, well, maybe there should be consequences to that. Then we explain it a bit more in the next sentence, but we still keep it focused and on topic. Personally, I don't think a boss should put up with lateness. Again, the use of active voice here instead of passive. In the previous sentence, we used passive a lot. Notice the change of grammar here, I guess. To put up with as well, that might be a phrasal verb that you're not aware of. But of course, this means to tolerate something, to be patient with something. But I don't think they should tolerate lateness. It's something that should kind of be punished in this way. So that's the answer to the second question. If we look at the answer to the third question in a bit more detail, that was a question asking for our advice. Can you suggest how people can make sure they don't arrive late? And we've started the question slightly different here. Of course, it is about our opinion, but kind of we haven't maybe got a strong opinion about this. So we start with, I guess, kind of showing we're not that sure. But then we've answered the question directly here. We've given some direct advice. They've got to. Now, this is a nice phrase to use to give advice. You've got to. It's kind of like saying you must, but it's much more common in spoken English to phrase things like this. Slightly more informal, but still appropriate for the IELTS speaking test. So they've got to aim to get somewhere a bit early. So that's the key advice here. This is what they should be doing, aiming to get somewhere early. And then actually we give another personal example straight away. I'm never really late, and it's because I give myself a bit of leeway. Now, leeway here, this is a noun, and it kind of means some extra time. So I give myself a little bit of leeway just in case something unexpected happens. So if, something that I don't expect happens, then I've got that bit of extra time. So I'm not going to be late. Then I explain it a bit more. You can see at the beginning of this next sentence, I say by doing this. Well, this refers to the action in the previous sentence. People might turn up slightly ahead of time. So again, you can see that phrasal verb, that turn up, and slightly ahead of time. Well, this means ahead of time means to be early here. You can see a lot of this language related to lateness and time, and this could be a useful phrase to learn there, to be ahead of time, so to be early for something. But there's not much chance of them being late. So there we go, a nice clear answer there. You can see none of these answers are really too long, but also they're not too short. They're fully answering these questions, giving my opinion and then explaining that a little bit. And you'll see a few examples here and there to help kind of explain my opinion and why I'm giving the answer I'm giving. Hopefully some of that vocabulary in those answers should be helpful for you to take a note of and try to use yourself when you're kind of talking about the topic of lateness and time. Now, if these answers were useful to you, then do remember to click the like button. And if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any similar videos in the future. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next video.